Well, I don't think there's any other words to really describe it. This was a historic Indianapolis 500. One of those races, and really the whole month, that I think we're going to look back on years from now and kind of say, man, I really remember fondly the 2024 Indianapolis 500. And so just the whole month, the excitement of the qualifications, the uncertainty of practice, the mechanical failures, the race itself. My goodness, we're going to talk a lot about the race itself. A few things that I think are really interesting about this race. Number one, I just want to thank all the fans who support this place, this institution, this race. The fact that this race was delayed 4 hours, the fact that this race went to almost or beyond 8 o'clock at night, which as far as I can tell is the latest an Indianapolis 500 has ever finished, although it's not the latest an oval race here has finished. A couple of the Brickyards took that crown. But the fact that the fans stuck this thing out and the stands were freaking packed for this race, that just tells you how hardy, dedicated, fantastic the fans are here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Nobody left. Nobody left the entire race. So that made me happy that people love this race in that way and are so passionate about it that they want to stick it out no matter what to see this entire 500-mile journey. This is the first rain-delayed Indianapolis 500 of any kind since 2007. And if I remember correctly, this is off the top of my head, the first race that was actually had the start delayed for rain since 2004, at least a significant delay. So a late start, 4:30 p.m., so all the NASCAR people will be very happy about that. Noon didn't save us this time. Fair enough. We finally got your 4:30 Indy 500. Hope you liked it. Hope you liked that Kyle Larson couldn't do the double. He got there, and then it rained in Charlotte. Amazing how that worked out. Amazing, actually, how quickly Kyle Larson got to Charlotte. The logistics that Hendrick Motorsports employed was unbelievable to do that. Spoiler alert, this was Team Penske's 20th Indianapolis 500 win. Needless to say, that extends a record. This is the first time we've seen a back-to-back winner since Helio Castroneves in 2001 and 2002. The new stat is that Joseph Newgarden is a repeat winner here at the Indianapolis 500 2023 and 2024. So before we go into a little bit more detail, I want to take a look at how the 33 starters finished this Indianapolis 500. And yes, Joseph Newgarden goes back-to-back in the Indianapolis 500. An absolutely fantastic pass on the outside to take the lead for the final time on the final lap from Pato O'Ward. The lead changed twice in the final lap. That, I believe, has never happened before. Scott Dixon. Actually, let's talk about Pato real quick because Pato's going to win this thing someday. We'll talk about him in more detail later on in this video. But devastation doesn't even begin to describe it for Pato O'Ward. He was so close once again. Did everything right as far as I could tell, and yet was unable to win the Indianapolis 500. Scott Dixon from his 21st starting spot, 21st, his worst starting spot ever in the Indianapolis 500, managed to take a third position finish. Scott Dixon looked like at one point that he was going to score his second Indianapolis 500 win. It came up just a little bit short. I think the pace of that car just wasn't there on the level of Pato or Newgarden at the end of the race. Alexander Rossi, kind of a surprise that he fell back. It looked like Rossi really was the challenger to Newgarden until O'Ward was able to work his way around him. And once Pato got past Alexander Rossi, it seemed like Rossi faded pretty quick. Alex Palou was running at the front, and it looked like he had a chance to get up there and compete for the win. I think we were all sleeping on the Ganassi duo of Dixon and Palou. They both end up in the top 5, but Palou wasn't able to compete for the victory this year. Scott McLaughlin, who was my pick for the win, looked strong, but just faded at the end of the race. Kind of surprising from Scott McLaughlin. The car looked fantastically fast, but they weren't quite there at the end. Kyle Kirkwood, huge shout out to him, recovering from a penalty for avoidable contact in the pit lane, bringing it home 7th, and at one point looked like he was going to be a legit top 5 contender. Santino Ferrucci extends one of the most amazing streaks in Indy 500 history. He's never, ever finished outside of the top 10. 8th place for the A.J. Foyt driver. He was up at the front at times today, but he just didn't quite have the pace to get up to the lead like he did last year. Rinus VeeKay, another top 10 finish for him. Probably the best 500 he's run. He was penalized as well, had to come back from that. So a top 10 from Rinus VeeKay. Great job for Rinus. Connor Daly was one of the great feel-good stories, coming from 29th spot on the starting grid all the way up to 10th. Led the race at times, took it from drivers like Scott McLaughlin. So Connor Daly, great strategy from the Dreyer and Reinbold crew to get him up there. Just a great finish for Connor Daly in his first run with Dreyer and Reinbold with Cusick Motorsports. Callum Ilott was all over the place today. In fact, had to start all the way at the back of the field after an issue trying to roll off the grid. But Callum Ilott was in the grass, he was sideways, he was side by side with drivers. But his first Indy 500 with Arrow McLaren puts him P11. Christian Rasmussen, what a fantastic finish for him. Coming up from the back of the field, we knew he would be exciting. We weren't sure if it was going to be a good finish or a crash. It turns out it's a good finish for Christian Rasmussen, and he looks like someday a driver who could win this Indianapolis 500. Christian Lundgaard had a solid day, ran at the front at times on strategy, and brings it home lucky 13th. Takuma Sato just didn't have the pace today in the Rahal Letterman Lanigan car, but 14th is a solid result, and in fact, he rounds out a threesome with Graham Rahal of the Rahal Letterman Lanigan team in 15th spot on the board. And honestly, Graham had a top 10 run going and maybe could have gotten a little higher up the field, but sped in the pits. And that was disappointing for Graham Rahal because he really, really looked strong at times today. Stingray Robb, I said he would qualify in the Fast 12. I didn't expect that he would lead laps. Yes, they were on strategy, but he legitimately took the lead at times today. Competitive passes, looked really strong. The finish, I don't think reflects how strongly he did run in this race. So Stingray Robb, big shout out to you, buddy. The A.J. Foyt team standing on business. Ed Carpenter was a little bit anonymous today. The most TV time he got was when he had to avoid the contact in the pits between Kirkwood and Ilott. But Carpenter did a good job and brought it home 17th. Not a stellar finish for Carpenter, but and he battled with another short track ace, Kyle Larson, 18th in his first Indianapolis 500 start. He chose the Indy 500 over Charlotte. But did end up, of course, getting to Charlotte, but didn't quite make it into the race car, which is crazy. But Larson, I felt like, had a good day. It was, I kind of mentioned it, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. It was mistakes that, due to inexperience, that were really going to cost Larson, and it was a speeding penalty in the pits, which knocked him out of a sure top 10 finish. Romain Grosjean finishes the Indy 500 for the first time in his career. No turn 2 crash this time. He shook that bug, so good for Romain. And I think the Juncos Hollinger cars really looked pretty good today. They weren't quite able to put it together at the end, and we'll talk about his teammate a little bit later in that. Helio Castroneves was in the top 10, and then he wasn't. I'll be honest, I don't exactly know what happened to Helio. I assume it was some sort of a pit lane snafu, but I didn't see it from my position. So Helio Castroneves, after running in the top 10 most of the day, ends up 20th. Kyffin Simpson had a good day. In fact, led some laps on strategy. Kept it on the road the whole day. That's exactly what you need to do for a rookie. The only teenager in the race drove a very mature Indianapolis 500. Augustine Canapino is the first car one lap down, but that's not really reflective of the day yet. A speeding penalty was really what took him out, and he was running at times easily in the top 10 and potentially had top 5 pace. Augustine Canapino, when he gets back here next year, really has a good shot to show what he's truly made of. He did a great job today. Colton Herta totally threw away the Indianapolis 500 today. There's no doubt about it. An incredible mistake where he spun out and crashed when he was in the second position. He did get back out onto the racetrack, but ultimately retired the car 30 laps behind the race, going for some points. 23rd for Colton Herta, unbelievable. Same for Will Power, a driver that so many people were picking, thought would look strong, and then just was nowhere in the race and ended up in the wall after trying to pass Christian Rasmussen. Marco Andretti also crashed, also looked like he was having a good day. That's ditto for Ryan Hunter-Reay, who ended up spun out on the back straightaway after contact with Scott Dixon. A very odd incident, something we haven't seen maybe ever at the Indy 500, a crash in that particular spot on the racetrack. Thankfully, Ryan didn't have as big of a crash as it looked like he would have. Real bad day for Sweden, it's got to be said. Felix Rosenqvist had one of several Honda engine failures. Linus Lundqvist had his second crash of the month. Catherine Legg, an engine failure. And ironically enough, she was having a good day, but 29th, the stat of the day is that this is her best Indianapolis 500 finish through no fault of her own, 29th. With an engine failure. Bad for Catherine Legg because she was looking pretty strong, making some competitive passes and moving up through the field in the early parts of the race. Marcus Armstrong was the first Honda engine to go pop, so he really, in his first oval start ever, really never got to show or see what the racing on these ovals is like. Tom Blomqvist caused the melee on the start, something we haven't seen in quite a while at the Indianapolis 500. A big spin, a big crash, which took out Pietro Fittipaldi and Marcus Ericsson, who was so disappointed, was making a big move on the start, thought he was going to have a good shot today and probably would have, but he, after finishing first and second the last 2 years at the Indianapolis 500, puts a big old goose egg on the board and finishes in the 33rd position. So this race truly was a mix of old and new here at the Indianapolis 500. Yes, it was kind of the fuel save train racing that we're so used to now, but attrition was a factor. There were several accidents. There were engine failures, which is something I kind of mentioned you should be on the lookout for earlier in the practice. These engine suppliers are pushing ridiculously hard, and it's great to see. It's going to sound weird, not great for the teams who had their engines fail, but it's great to see them pushing. And speaking of that, the Honda engine failures, I think it's a big talking point for sure. It was something that we were concerned about at the GP when we started to see engines expiring. We hadn't seen too many Hondas go away. I remember Alex Palou was one of them during the month on the oval. Scott Dixon had one changed. Ironically enough, neither of them had a Honda engine failure. But, it's definitely not a good look for sure, especially from the teams who are supplied by Honda. But I'll say the same thing I said for Chevy when they were having the plenum incidents. I don't want to hear a manufacturer apologize for grenading motors. I think that's what we want to see. I think we want to see boundaries pushed and sometimes exceeded. I think Honda did everything they could to take it to Chevy. They knew they were running on a bit of a deficit this race. And so would you rather just see all of the cars run off the pace, or would you rather see some of them competitive and some of them blow up? And I know exactly what my opinion about that is, and I want to see if we're going to have a true open spec series where there's development and competition between the engine manufacturers, let's blow some shit up. I'm cool with it. I like it. I felt like this was the kind of Indy 500 that I grew up with as a kid. There was uncertainty. There was a level of uncertainty with every Honda car and every Honda that was running up front. You didn't know if Alex Palou was going to blow an engine. You didn't know if Scott Dixon was going to blow an engine. You didn't know if Colton Herta was going to blow an engine. That was what made it exciting. That's what made this race enjoyable from start to finish. The Andretti implosion, I just mentioned Colton Herta. Well, he spun out and got in the wall. So it was crazy to see that. Marco got in the wall. Ericsson obviously caught up in the accident of Tom Blomqvist at the start. And then Kyle Kirkwood got that incident in the pits where he was penalized. Ultimately, Kirkwood ended up in the top 10, so a really good run for him. But it's surprising because everybody was so high on the Andretti team, and frankly, Colton Herta, I think, had a race-winning car today. And the fact that they essentially come away with nothing, it says something about the day, the loss of an opportunity there for the Andretti team. Joseph Newgarden, I suppose we'll talk about the winner. One of the best passes I've ever seen. One of the most exciting last laps I've ever seen for Joseph Newgarden to win that race in the fashion that he did. It was calculated. It was incredible. You have to realize the car advantage that he had to pass Pato going into turn 3. Typically, a section of the racetrack where we don't necessarily see competitive passes. We see passes when they're swapping for fuel, but you don't see somebody drive around the outside and make the pass into turn 3. The last time I remember that was Helio Castroneves on Takuma Sato in 2017. Ultimately, Sato lost, or Castroneves lost the race on that move. But Joseph, I think a bit of this is redemption for Joseph, for sure. We know all of the controversy that got him and Scott McLaughlin and a whole bunch of other guys at Team Penske in a lot of trouble. Of course, he lost his engineer as well as his strategist, Tim Cindric, for this race. So the chips were really stacked against Joseph Newgarden. And there were a lot of question marks after last year's race. We've covered that in extensive detail. The talk about the red flags, was it a gifted win, which I think is a little bit unfair. I think ultimately IndyCar just wanted to have a green flag finish in 2023, and ultimately on the restarts, you're a sitting duck. Anybody would have been in Marcus Ericsson's shoes in that situation. So from my perspective, I think Joseph Newgarden I think silenced the doubters here, right? I mean, unless they tear that car apart and for some reason he was using push to pass, which I don't think he was. In fact, I know he wasn't. He drove to the front of the Indy 500. He had one of the strongest cars all day, and when it counted, he performed. And for a driver who, tied Sam Hanks and Tony Kanaan last year as the driver with the longest period between his rookie year and his first win, for him to go back-to-back, it says a lot about Joseph. And the driver who's been so dominant on all of these ovals except Indy, all of a sudden that storyline's well and truly gone. So, yeah, deserving champion. What else can you say about Joseph Newgarden? Pato Award. The kid's going to win the Indianapolis 500 someday. The fact that he started this week, in fact, on Friday, said, look, our car's not there. We're not there. And was able to take that car, which he was not confident in, and duel for the win with the defending champion of this race. Amazing. And frankly, I was sitting there and just in the stands yelling at Pato. Like, I think he made the right move. I don't think Pato, because there's always so many question marks. There's always people second-guessing Pato Award when he makes moves in the Indy 500. The 2022 race where people said, oh, he should have flat-footed it. And then last year when he flat-footed it with Marcus and he crashed. This year he didn't make a mistake. And in fact, I don't even think the move into one was the mistake. I think that was exactly when you had to make the move. The unfortunate reality of the situation was that Joseph Newgarden had one of the only cars that could legitimately pass someone into turn 3. You really can't defend that. I don't think Pato would have been able to make that same move had the roles been reversed. Ultimately, the best car and driver won this race today, but Pato, I think, was equal to Joseph in terms of the driving. I think Joseph just had the better car, which it happens in the Indianapolis 500. That's what makes this race so good. So yeah, I think Pato will win this race eventually, but it's great to have a popular driver not necessarily win it every year and have a little bit of tension going into each month of May and each growing month of May. It's kind of like Tony Kanaan. He keeps losing it so closely, and every time he takes the lead, those cheers get louder and louder and louder. So I think it's great for the sport that the Pato Award is so competitive here at the Indianapolis 500, and the fans are really behind him. Kyle Larson, solid rookie performance. I think he's earned the Rookie of the Year for all of the things that he has done over the month. I think there is a question mark. I think Christian Rasmussen certainly had a very, very solid Indianapolis 500, but the rest of the month wasn't as good for Christian Rasmussen. So, Kyle Larson, for sure the Rookie of the Year. But to go back to an interview I did with Eric Estep on the Out of the Groove channel, Larson was always going to make a mistake. And he made a couple of them in this race. The most egregious was the speeding penalty, which ultimately took him out of the top 10. But there was also that restart where he almost got crashed into the inside wall when he kind of spun the tires and absolutely got swamped. But Kyle Larson learned all of the lessons that he needed to learn in this Indianapolis 500, save for hitting the wall, that he can take into next year and try to win the Indianapolis 500. And I think he will actually be able to be very competitive in next year's race. So, goofy stuff. I was thankful that there wasn't a lot of goofy stuff in this race. I was a little bit concerned that we were, especially towards the end, you're just waiting for the red flag, right? You're waiting for someone to crash. And we didn't have that. We had a legitimate shot at a legit fight for the victory. It was fantastic. I loved it. It was awesome. So, yeah, you still have some goofiness with guys fuel saving and not wanting to lead the race. Again, that's a problem that a new car will solve. Hello, Carter Bowles.
I love David Land, the GOAT.
You know, he was also the guy who told me that the race was going to run at 4 o'clock, and he was right. Love Carter. He's a good guy. So, yeah, I think that, you know, the only thing that will change that aspect, which to me is a minor nitpick about this race, the fact that no one wants to actually lead the race. Everybody's trying to get in the background of this. There's Jason Van Sickle of the IMS Museum driving the golf cart. He's a very good driver. Everybody just wants their say. Hello. Oh my God, Jason and Mandy from the IMS Museum. Everybody, they're good. They're good people there. We love the IMS Museum. Got to spend some time with them. Notice how everyone's trying to stop me from complaining. Maybe perhaps I should stop complaining. But yeah, I think the thing that made this race so compelling was the fact that the attrition rate and the strategy that came from the early yellows helped this race. It was much like a road course race. So I loved it. It was a very, very good Indianapolis 500. Going to get a little serious here. Thanks everybody who reached out and said hi over the course of the month. Your support means a ton to me. Thanks to my team, Kyle, Joe, and Matt, who did so much over the course of this month. Fantastic work. You know, I couldn't have done it without them. They're my boys, for sure. And thanks to the drivers, teams, and crew members who were so generous with their time, allowed me to annoy them throughout this month of May. Didn't get to do as much as I would have liked. I mean, you always leave something on the table, but I felt like this month was really good. So especially I'll give a big shout out to a higher up in a really high team who I didn't realize watched my videos until this morning, and got to shake his hand, and you know who you are, but thank you for that. That meant a lot to me, for sure. So on to Detroit. But first, you know, tomorrow, Kyle and I will have a bit of a discussion here at the Speedway about more of the things that we talked about in this video, just kind of a back and forth discussion. But, you know, we need to sleep on it before we get that done. But again, to all the folks who made this month of May what it was so refreshing. I'm so happy. I can't wait to see all you guys as time goes on. And I cannot wait to be back here for the 109th Indianapolis 500 in 2012. 2012. Can you tell I've been up to 4 o'clock this morning? 2025. We'll see you then. Thank you guys so much for watching.